Sandra's whisper. The night was quiet, but inside the grand hall every heart was restless. Soft golden lights hung from the ceiling, casting a glow that made the evening look like a dream. People had gathered, not just to see a performance, but to witness something they could not even name. It felt as if the air carried a secret waiting to be revealed. And in the center of it all, Keanu Reeves stood with a calm face that hid storms within. The audience looked at him with respect. He was not only the famous actor they admired, but a man known for kindness, humility, and patience. Tonight, however, something different was about to happen. His steady gaze was searching the crowd as though he was waiting for someone. There was tension in his silence, a pull that made everyone lean forward, afraid to blink in case they missed the moment. Sandra Bullock sat among the people, her hands clasped tightly together. Her heart raced faster than it had in years. She had carried a truth for so long, hidden behind smiles and friendship, hidden behind laughter and work. And now, in this hall, with the lights warm and the silence heavy, she felt the truth pressing at her lips, demanding to be spoken. She looked at Keanu, and her eyes softened, trembling with emotion. The world knew them as friends, partners in stories on screen, two people who shared history. But what the world did not know was that Sandra's feelings had grown deeper than friendship. She had fought them, resisted them, convinced herself they were only passing shadows. But every time she saw Keanu's quiet smile, every time she watched him show kindness to strangers, the feelings grew stronger, unshakable, undeniable. Keanu moved across the stage, his voice gentle as he greeted the audience. The words he spoke were calm, yet everyone could sense a weight in them, as if he was carrying something inside. Sandra rose from her seat slowly, her breath shaky. No one noticed at first, but then heads began to turn. Whispers moved through the hall. Why was she standing? What was she going to do? Her steps were soft, but each one echoed louder in her chest. She walked closer, closer to him, her heart nearly breaking through her ribs. When she reached the stage, the crowd grew silent. Even Keanu's voice stopped. His eyes met hers, steady and warm. But behind that calmness was surprise. She leaned toward him, and in that heavy silence, she whispered in his ear, "I have loved you for longer than I can explain." The hall froze. No one breathed. It was as if the entire world had paused, waiting to hear his response. Her words were soft, but they carried more power than the loudest scream. Keanu closed his eyes for a moment. He had always lived with grace, never letting emotions control him. But now he felt his heart shake in a way it hadn't in years. The audience could not hear the words she whispered, but they saw his stillness. They saw his hand tremble slightly, and they knew something extraordinary had just happened. And yet, this was only the beginning. Behind the whisper, behind the confession, was a story filled with conflict. Old wounds, choices yet to be made, and emotions that could either heal them both or tear them apart. The crowd waited. Sandra's eyes glistened with tears she fought to hold back. Keanu looked at her, his lips parting, his heart racing. What he said next would change everything. Not just for them, but for everyone who believed in love, kindness, and second chances. The silence after the whisper. The hall was still, so still that even the soft hum of lights above felt loud. Everyone stared at the stage where Sandra stood, her words hanging in the air like a fragile thread. Keanu had not spoken yet, and that silence was heavier than anything. People leaned forward, holding their breath, desperate to know what he would say. Sandra's hands shook. She had carried those words for years, but once they left her lips, she felt both lighter and more afraid. She wondered if she had done the right thing. Had she risked everything? Their friendship, their bond, by speaking out loud what her heart had hidden for so long? Keanu's eyes softened. He looked at her as if time itself had slowed down. Inside him, emotions clashed like waves in a storm. He had always been the man who placed others before himself, who chose silence instead of unnecessary drama, who walked away quietly from chaos. But tonight, Sandra's whisper had pulled him into a place where silence was no longer enough. "Sandra!" His voice finally broke the silence. It was soft, almost fragile, but it carried weight. The crowd leaned in, desperate for more. Before he could continue, a sudden noise came from the back of the hall. A camera clicked, then another, then dozens. Reporters had sensed that something rare was unfolding, and they would not let the moment escape. Flashes of light began to fill the room, turning this private confession into something public. Sandra flinched. She had not wanted the world to hear her truth, not like this. Her whisper was meant for his ear alone, but now it felt like everyone was stealing a piece of it. Keanu noticed her fear, and without thinking, he stepped closer to her. His calm presence was like a shield, his quiet strength a promise that she was not alone. "I need to say this to you," he whispered back. But the microphones caught the faint sound. "But not here. Not like this." His words were gentle, but his eyes were firm. He reached for her hand, and the crowd gasped. The hall erupted in murmurs, shock spreading like fire. Was this the moment the world would see a new chapter in their story? Or would it break under the pressure of so many watching eyes? They left the stage together, moving quickly past the cameras. Outside the hall, the cool night air wrapped around them. Sandra breathed deeply, her chest still heavy but her heart pounding with hope. Keanu walked beside her in silence, his grip steady, his thoughts deep. "Why now?" he asked softly once they were away from the noise. "After all these years, why tonight?" Sandra lowered her eyes. "Because I couldn't hide anymore. I've watched you live with kindness, with humility, with pain you never show to the world. And every time I tried to push away what I felt, it only grew stronger. Tonight, I couldn't stop it." Her honesty shook him. For so long, he had believed that life's losses had closed certain doors forever. He had accepted loneliness as a quiet companion, choosing simplicity over risk. But now, Sandra's words were pulling him into a choice he had not expected to face. He looked up at the stars above them. "You know what this means," he said slowly. "The world will never leave us alone now. Every step, every look, every word will be judged." "I know," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But I would rather face that storm than spend another night pretending my heart is empty." A long silence followed. The night seemed endless, stretching between them. Then, out of nowhere, a stranger approached. It was an older woman carrying flowers in her hands. She had seen them leave the hall and had followed with hesitation. "Forgive me," she said softly, "but I had to come. I just want to say, what you both share, it gives hope to people like me. I lost my husband years ago, and I thought love ended there. But tonight, hearing her whisper and seeing you stand with her, it reminded me that love can still be real, even when we least expect it." Her words broke something inside Sandra. Tears fell down her cheeks and Keanu's chest tightened. The woman smiled gently, placed the flowers in Sandra's hands, and walked away into the night. Keanu looked at Sandra, and in that moment, he realized something powerful. Love was not just about them. It was about what their bond could mean. To others, what hope it could awaken in people who had forgotten how to dream. But with hope came danger. For every person who saw beauty in their connection, there would be others ready to tear it apart. And deep inside, both of them knew their journey was only beginning. As the night grew colder, Sandra whispered again, this time not in his ear, but in the open air between them. Whatever happens next, I am not afraid if you are with me. Keanu finally let out a breath he had been holding all night. The storm was coming, but so was the possibility of something greater than either of them had dared to believe. When the storm arrived, the morning after their quiet walk beneath the stars, the world had already changed. Newspapers carried their faces, magazines splashed headlines across glossy covers, and every social media feed was filled with endless whispers. The story of Sandra's confession had spread like fire, twisting into 1,000 versions. Some painted it as the most beautiful moment of truth. Others treated it as a scandal. Keanu sat by the window of his home, the sunlight falling gently on his face. He had always lived away from noise, choosing quiet streets and ordinary places, but now there was no escape. Outside, cameras lined the road. Reporters waited, their lenses aimed at his door, eager to catch even the smallest reaction. His phone buzzed again and again, but he ignored it. Messages from friends, producers, even strangers poured in, but none of them mattered. His mind was on Sandra. He remembered the way her voice shook when she whispered in his ear, the way her hand trembled when he held it. Those moments were still alive inside him, stronger than all the noise outside. Sandra, meanwhile, sat alone in her own home. She was not afraid of the world, but she was afraid of losing him. She knew the industry could be cruel, twisting love into a performance, turning private emotions into public entertainment. She feared that Keanu, with his gentle soul, might decide to walk away rather than be trapped under that spotlight. As the day passed, a knock came at Sandra's door. When she opened it, she found Keanu standing there, his face calm but his eyes heavy with thought. "We need to talk," he said softly. They sat together in her living room. No cameras, no reporters, just silence. Sandra braced herself, fearing his words, but he surprised her. "The world already made this bigger than we ever wanted," he said, his voice steady. "But I don't care what they say. What I care about is what you meant when you whispered those words." Sandra's chest tightened. She met his eyes and answered without hesitation. "I meant every single word. I wasn't brave enough before, but I am now. I love you, Keanu. I've loved you for so long." His silence stretched for a moment, but then he leaned forward. "Do you know why I didn't answer you right away? It wasn't because I don't feel the same. It's because I am afraid of what love demands. It asks for trust, for sacrifice, for facing storms together. I wasn't sure if we were ready." "We are ready," Sandra whispered, her voice breaking. "And if we are not, we will learn." Before he could reply, his phone rang again. This time he looked at it. It was his sister. He stepped aside to answer, but Sandra could hear enough to know something was wrong. His sister's voice was urgent, filled with worry. When he returned, his calm mask had cracked. "A member of our family has been followed by paparazzi," he said quietly. "They tried to force her to talk about us. She's shaken." Sandra's heart sank. She knew fame carried shadows, but this was different. This was their love dragging innocent people into pain. Guilt weighed on her, but Keanu placed his hand gently on hers. "Don't blame yourself," he said. "This is the cost of truth. The world doesn't know how to leave kindness alone, but that doesn't mean we stop being kind." His words carried strength, but his eyes revealed fear. The storm was not just about flashing lights or endless headlines. It was about protecting their peace, their dignity, their families. Later that evening, they decided to meet in a quieter place far from cameras. They chose a small old cafe tucked in a hidden street where they once went years ago during a film shoot. As they entered, the owner, an elderly man with kind eyes, recognized them immediately. Instead of questions, he simply smiled and said, "Love deserves silence too. Sit, and I will guard it for you." They sat at the corner table, the air filled with the smell of fresh coffee. Keanu leaned closer, lowering his voice. If we move forward, we can't do it halfway. We will have to be stronger than the storm. We will need to stand even when the world shakes us. Sandra nodded. I don't want halfway. I want all of it, even if it breaks me. In that cafe, for the first time, Keanu allowed himself to soften. His hand reached across the table, holding hers, not as a shield this time, but as a promise. Yet as warm as that moment was, both of them knew the storm was only beginning. In the distance, even in that safe little cafe, they could hear faint noises, the murmurs of voices outside, the sound of a world hungry for more than it deserved. And still, in the middle of that storm, two hearts whispered louder than the noise around them. The choice they could not avoid. The cafe where they had found comfort soon became a memory because the outside world refused to stay away. By the next morning, even that quiet, hidden street was filled with reporters, their cameras flashing like relentless storms. People crowded around, not just strangers but fans too, shouting questions, begging for answers. Some cheered for them, some doubted them, and others simply wanted to watch the drama unfold. Keanu and Sandra remained inside the cafe longer than they planned, sitting in silence, listening to the noise outside. Sandra's heart was heavy. She had spoken her truth, and Keanu had not walked away, but now the weight of her words felt larger than ever. Finally, Keanu spoke. We cannot hide forever, he said quietly. Every step we take now is a choice. Do we run from this? Or do we face it? Sandra stared at him, tears pressing at the edge of her eyes. If we run, we lose what we've just found. If we face it, we risk losing our peace. He nodded. Either way, something is lost. But maybe, just maybe, if we are honest, we can keep what matters most. The cafe owner came to their table, his face kind but worried. They will not leave you alone, he said softly. But remember, storms come to test the strength of trees, not to destroy the roots. His words lingered like an old blessing. They finally left the cafe hand in hand. The crowd erupted, flashes burning their eyes, voices calling out, demanding answers. Keanu paused on the steps, Sandra at his side, and for a moment he simply looked at the people. He did not raise his voice, but when he spoke, the street fell silent. We are human, he said, his tone steady. We live with respect. We make mistakes. We care for each other. What was whispered last night was not a show, not a game. It was the truth of a heart. And I will not let the world turn truth into shame. Sandra looked at him, her chest trembling. His words were not just for the crowd. They were for her, for everyone who doubted, for himself, too. But the silence did not last long. Soon, headlines grew louder. Some praised his honesty, others twisted it into scandal. Producers worried about contracts, agents whispered about reputation. And among all this noise, an unexpected voice rose from the shadows of their past. An old friend of Sandra's, someone who had once shared the screen with her, gave an interview that spread quickly. She hinted that Sandra's confession was nothing more than a stunt, a way to capture attention. It's Hollywood, she said. Nothing is real here. Her words cut deeper than knives, not because Sandra feared the world's opinion, but because betrayal always came from those close enough to hurt. Sandra broke down in private. I never wanted this, she whispered to Keanu, her face buried in her hands. I wanted to speak my heart to you, not to the world. Now it feels like I've lost control of my own truth. Keanu knelt beside her, lifting her face gently. You did nothing wrong. The world doesn't decide if your love is real. Only you do. Only we do. His steady presence gave her strength, but even he could feel the cracks. Their story was becoming bigger than them, and that terrified him. Still, he refused to let fear guide him. A few nights later, they decided to disappear for a while, to escape the noise. They drove far from the city, into the mountains where the sky stretched wide and the air was clean. There, in the quiet of a small wooden cabin, they finally breathed freely. Around the fire, with the night wind brushing against the windows, Sandra spoke again. "Do you ever wonder if we are strong enough for this? Strong enough for the world, for the storms, for the shadows?" Keanu looked into the flames, his face calm but thoughtful. "Strength is not about never falling," he said softly. "It is about standing up again, together. I do not know what tomorrow will bring, but I know I want to face it with you." She reached for his hand, and for the first time since that whisper in the hall, she felt peace. Yet even as they found comfort in each other's presence, a storm was brewing beyond the mountains. People were digging into their past, searching for cracks, for weaknesses, for reasons to doubt, and soon someone from Keanu's past would step into the light, carrying words that could either destroy everything they had built or push them into a truth deeper than they ever imagined. The fire crackled, the stars glowed, and their hearts whispered promises stronger than fear. But outside that cabin, the world sharpened its knives, ready for the next twist. The ghost of the past. The cabin in the mountains gave them a short peace, but peace never lasts forever. Outside, the world still talked, still speculated, still judged. In the quiet nights, Sandra and Keanu felt the weight of that noise pressing against their fragile silence. One evening, as snow fell gently against the glass window, Sandra sat with a cup of tea in her hands. Her eyes were tired, her heart still heavy. Keanu sat across from her, watching the fire burn low. He had always been steady, but even he could not hide the storm building inside. "I thought leaving the city would give us time," Sandra whispered, "but the world keeps pulling us back." Keanu nodded slowly. "We can't run forever. No matter how far we go, the truth follows us." Before either of them could say more, Keanu's phone buzzed on the wooden table. He almost ignored it, but something in his chest told him to look. When he did, his face changed. The message was short, but it carried weight heavier than stone. "Someone from your past is speaking to the press." Sandra saw the shift in his eyes. "Who is it?" she asked softly. He hesitated before answering. "A woman I once knew. Someone I cared about long ago. She's telling them stories. Half-truths, half-lies. Enough to make people question me." The words stung. Not because Sandra doubted him, but because she knew how dangerous doubt could be when the whole world was listening. She reached across the table and held his hand. "Whatever she says, I trust you." But trust alone would not silence the storm. The very next day, headlines spread again. The woman claimed that Keanu was incapable of real love, that he had once walked away from her when she needed him most. She painted him as distant, cold, a man who preferred solitude over connection. Sandra read the words, her chest tightening. She knew Keanu's heart better than anyone, but she also knew the world did not care about truth. It cared about drama. Keanu remained calm on the outside, but inside, old wounds reopened. He remembered the past clearly, remembered the pain of losing people he had cared for, not because he did not love them, but because he feared hurting them with his brokenness. He had chosen silence and distance as shields, and now those choices had returned as weapons against him. That night, he sat outside the cabin, staring at the stars. Sandra joined him, wrapping a blanket around them both. "They will use your past against you," she whispered, "but your past does not define you. The man you are today is what matters." He turned to her, his eyes filled with a quiet storm. "What if they are right? What if I cannot hold on? What if I fail you like I failed before? Sandra held his face gently, forcing him to meet her eyes. You are not the man you were then. You are stronger, kinder, wiser, and even if you stumble, I will not let go. Love is not about perfection. It's about standing when everything else tries to break you. Her words melted something inside him. For years, he had carried guilt like a shadow. Now, in her presence, he felt it lift, even just a little. But their private strength did not stop the world from circling. Soon, reporters climbed the mountain roads trying to capture glimpses of them. Helicopters flew above, cameras ready to steal even their silence. The cabin, once their safe place, was no longer theirs. One evening, as they prepared to leave, the cafe owner from before appeared at their door. He had driven far, carrying food and a letter. His face was calm, his eyes warm. I came to remind you, he said, placing the letter in their hands. Storms are loud, but they end. Love is quiet, but it endures. When they opened the letter after he left, they found simple words written in careful handwriting. The world will try to take your story away from you. Do not let it. Speak, your truth louder than their lies. Sandra looked at Keanu, tears in her eyes. Maybe it's time we stop hiding. Maybe it's time we tell our story ourselves, not let others twist it. He nodded slowly. If we speak, it has to be with honesty. Not a performance, not for cameras, but for truth. That night, they made a choice. They would return to the city, not as people running from noise, but as two hearts ready to face it. As they drove down the mountain roads, the snow behind them fading into the distance, Sandra whispered one more time, just for him. Whatever comes, we face it together. No more fear. Keanu's hand tightened on hers. The storm had not passed, but now they were no longer running. They were walking into it, side by side, ready for the next battle. And somewhere in the shadows of the city, another twist waited, because the same woman from his past was planning more than just words. She was planning to confront him directly. The final whisper. The drive back into the city was quiet. Sandra leaned her head against the window, watching lights flicker in the distance. Keanu kept his hands steady on the wheel, his eyes forward, his heart heavy but determined. They were no longer running. They were no longer hiding. They were going back to face the storm. But storms are not predictable. When they arrived, the noise was already waiting. Cameras flashed, voices shouted, and the city felt sharper than ever. Yet, deep inside, both of them carried a calm strength they had not felt before. The very next day, as they prepared to speak their truth publicly, the past arrived in flesh. The woman who had spoken to the press came forward, demanding to see Keanu face to face. She wanted answers, not just for herself, but for the world watching. They met in a quiet room, away from the chaos outside. Sandra sat beside Keanu, her presence unshakable. The woman entered with fire in her eyes, but also with hurt. You left me when I needed you, she said, her voice trembling. You talk about kindness, about humility, but when it mattered, you walked away. Keanu lowered his head. The silence was heavy, but this time he did not hide. You are right, he said softly. I walked away because I was afraid. I was broken, and I thought leaving you would save you from my pain. But in doing so, I hurt you. I cannot erase that. I cannot change the past. But I can tell you this. I am not running anymore. I have learned, and I will not make the same mistake again. The woman's anger slowly melted into tears. She had come with bitterness, but his honesty disarmed her. Sandra reached out, placing a hand on the woman's arm. We all carry wounds, she whispered. But wounds can either divide us or teach us. Tonight, let them teach us. For the first time, the three of them sat in silence, not as enemies, but as people carrying different parts of the same pain. When the woman finally left, she did not smile, but she also did not look back with hatred. Sometimes, closure is not peace, but it is still freedom. Later that night, Keanu and Sandra stood on a stage once again. But this time, they chose the stage themselves. It was not for a movie, not for a performance, but for truth. The crowd was endless, cameras aimed, the whole world waiting. Keanu took a deep breath. "We are not here to entertain you tonight," he began. "We are here to speak as humans. Love is not a performance. It is not a headline. It is not a scandal. Love is truth, whispered when no one else is listening, and lived even when everyone is watching." Sandra stepped closer to the microphone, her voice soft but steady. "I whispered my heart to him because I could not carry it alone anymore. I did not expect applause. I did not expect the world to listen. I only hoped he would hear me. But if you are all listening now, then let this be a reminder. Never be afraid to speak your truth, no matter how heavy the silence after." The crowd was silent. Not because they had no words, but because the words they heard had reached deeper than gossip ever could. Keanu turned to Sandra, his eyes soft. In front of everyone, he leaned close and whispered back into her ear, just as she had done to him. "I love you, Sandra, and I will love you for the rest of my life." She closed her eyes, tears falling, her heart trembling with relief. The crowd erupted, not with noise, but with something different. Applause that felt more like respect than curiosity. In that moment, the storm broke. The noise of the world did not vanish, but it no longer mattered. They had spoken their truth. They had faced their fears. They had chosen each other. As the lights dimmed and the night settled, Sandra whispered one last time, her voice only for him. This time the whole world heard. But my heart knows it was always just for you. And for once, silence was not heavy. It was peaceful. The story that began with a whisper ended with another, not fragile, not hidden, but eternal.